You're at your old trusty boat. You call mighty sparrow. I'm in the city of Mardi Gras.
Welcome to the Sailing into Oblivion podcast. I'm your host, Jerome Rand. All right, and we are live. I have with me today aboard Mighty Sparrow, Eli Saint-Amour. Is that it? Did I say that right?
Yep, you said that absolutely right.
Awesome.
Might be the first time anyone ever did.
Hey, congratulations to me. Now, what does that last name mean? Because that's a really interesting last name.
So Saint-Amour is, it's the direct translation is Saint of Love, and it came from Saint-Amour, France, where way back my ancestors came over from Saint-Amour, France, and so everybody who came from that town took the last name Saint-Amour. So occasionally I'll meet people with a similar name where it's kind of changed over the years. My one has abbreviation, so it's ST period space, so that's always fun to try to register with agencies and stuff.
I could imagine little error codes coming up left, right, and center.
So, yeah.
Well, that's it. Well, you've been down here at Ladies Island. You sailed in, it was about a week or two ago, and yeah, basically joining the family. And so I want to find out as much as possible because what little I do know, it's sailor / beekeeper / future adventurer, and man, it amazes me. So I guess I always like to start off, what are you sailing? What'd you come down here on?
So I sail a Catalina 30 tall rig. So it's only a 30-foot boat, but it's got a 48-foot mast and 150% Genoa. So a lot of nice sail area for the size of boat. And I was very fortunate when I bought it. A lot of the previous owner, 2 owners ago, had set it up for racing. So the sails are super nice and easy to handle. And then the last owner was a friend of mine. He set it up as a live aboard / day sailor. And then I'm kind of taking it to the next level of trying to make it to a cruising boat.
Oh, nice. And down below has a huge amount of room. I mean, I hear it a lot when people see this boat and they come down below and they're like, wow, it looks a lot smaller from the outside, but yours definitely does. I mean, I was amazed. I mean, that first night we had 6 or 7 of us packed in there, and there's plenty of room.
Yeah, it has almost a 12-foot beam, so it's a lot of room. It's a lot of fun to hang out with people on the boat and be able to really use it for more than just a place to sleep and a place to sail. I can really host and have people over, which is nice.
Well, and yeah, I mean, from literally almost the first night you were here, you were already hosting people. Eli, I would definitely put you in the realm of, the sort of entertainer as you come into a marina, and every marina needs that because it sort of brings people together. It's very easy sometimes, especially in the winter, I think, to have people sort of shrink back into their boats when it's cold and not get out there, but it's people like you that sort of bring everybody out and bring them together. So thank you for that.
Yeah, my pleasure. And that was one of the big things I was looking for when I set out on this journey, was really the people. It's, sailing is awesome. I really love sailing, but meeting other sailors and other travelers and just you meet the most interesting people at marinas and out on boats and working on boats. And so that was something I was really looking for. And I was super happy when I found this place because it's just really awesome, nice people, super interesting people. Every time I'm working on a project, I can just, walk from one end of the marina to the other, and I'll run into 3 people who've already done the project and can give me all the advice about it. So
little meet and greets here and there. I mean, it's never really a lonely place when you're in a marina. And like you said, most of the people that you meet, you don't see a lot of 9 to 5. I'm working in a bank sort of people. It's people typically who have done that and then decided they wanted to go a different route. But you actually sort of are able to mix it up a little bit because when you go back, well, before I even get into that, so where did you come from when you sailed down here?
So I started in Philadelphia. I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia and moved to my boat there about 3 years ago, right after college.
And that's right in the city, right? or very close.
Right
to it?
outside the city, yeah, near the airport.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's I've been living there for a couple of years on the boat, kind of getting the boat comfortable to live on, figuring out, heat, fresh water, and things that you kind of need to have a comfortable living space.
Well, were you staying there in the wintertime up there for those first 3 years?
Yes,
On
yeah.
the boat as well?
So yeah, I was on the
Wow.
boat year round. Now, because I don't work during the winter, I was able to, or my beekeeping business, I don't work on that during the winter. I can travel a little bit. So last year I was only there for about 3 days of February. I was
Yeah.
on the boat, and then the rest I was traveling. But that's kind of, in terms of living space, that's kind of my primary and only residence.
Nice. Well, I've really enjoyed, sort of just living afloat. There's that sort of freedom that that if you wanted to, you could head off pretty much anywhere you want to go. But at the same time, if you put the effort in, I've always found that you can make your boat really, really like a home. And, it's, I don't know, there's something about it. You have to actually sort of put some effort into it, but it is. You can, might as well have a welcome mat sitting on the dock sort of thing. It does sort of transform into that. The idea of a boat just always being some boat that you take out on the water and sail and bring back, I think changes for us liveaboards a lot.
Yeah, it's really different when it's your home, and that's one of the big things I tell people when they're trying to figure out how to get into sailing and boating, especially younger people, is, everybody tells you, like, from the second you start talking about buying a boat, everybody tells you, oh, it's the most expensive thing you'll ever buy. Boat stands for break out another 1,000, which is kind of true.
A hole in the water you throw money into.
Yep. The most untrue one was the happiest day in a man's life is when he buys a boat and when he sells his boat.
Right.
I've never met a sailor that believed that. I met a lot of people who, never used their boat that believe that. But
I know a lot that shed a tear when they actually have to sell it for whatever reason.
Yeah, so it's nice to have it as your home, and it also kind of makes the whole thing work financially too, because you're not paying rent somewhere else, so you can put that money into your boat, making your boat nice and a good place to live and hang out. And why would you, if your boat is where you want to go on your day off, then why wouldn't it be where you want to spend all your time?
Right, exactly. Well, and what was it that gave you the bug? Did you have other boats before, or was it you just decided, all right, it's time, I'm moving on a boat, I'm going to shake things up?
Yeah, so it was something I kind of wanted to do as kind of a vague idea in I guess high school was when I first started thinking about it. Probably when the Pirates of the Caribbean movies came out, it was like,
Yep.
Sailing is cool, I want to do this, and learned a little bit about it through the Sea Scouts. It's an incredible sailing education organization through the Boy Scouts, and ended up doing apprenticeship on tall ship Mystic Whaler and getting into the tall ship world.
Nice.
And really learning about that kind of sailing. And it just very quickly became something. It's like I want to do this for a long time. And when it came time to figure out where I was going to live after college, the boat was just really the clear option. I looked at, converting a van or renting in a place, buying a house, whatever the case may be. And it just always came back to, you just can't beat boat life. It's the best.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, when I start thinking of things like mortgages and property taxes and all that, I just start to, I look right back to boats, and I think, man, life is just a little simpler when you're dealing with these in some ways. In other ways, it can, it's not very typical for a house to start sinking when the bilge pump fails.
True. Very
So there's
true.
pros and cons, but that's absolutely crazy with the tall ships. What was sort of one of the biggest adventures you had on any of those?
Well, definitely the Great Chesapeake Bay Schooner race is kind of the highlight of the year. Basically, we all sail from Baltimore to Norfolk nonstop, using only sail power. So it's an overnight or 2 or 3 days, depending on whether the wind's coming from the right direction or not.
How many ships would be in that?
I believe it was about 25
Tall ships,
last
25
year.
tall ships. Also, oh man,
Yeah,
that
all
must be
historic
amazing.
schooners, and that's maybe 300 sailors, and it's just a really, really awesome time. Everybody's super into, sailing and living that kind of lifestyle, and it's a great way to get into sailing because you're with a crew of other people, so you can learn from other people. You're not kind of just diving right into being in charge of your own boat, and you learn a lot on the tall ships. It's a great learning experience.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, the captains on those boats, that's like a lifetime it takes to just get to that point. And I mean, I think if you really had that bug, it would be such an extraordinary life to lead, where you're basically starting out as just a deckhand on those boats and working your way constantly, because there's so many different jobs. Because I mean, how many people were crewing on your boat?
So the biggest, I mostly specialize in I sail the smaller schooners a lot of times. So, but 10 or 11 people is on Northwind, which I've been doing the race on most frequently. She's a steel-hulled schooner out of Gloucester, New Jersey. But then it goes all the way down to Summerwind, is one of the smaller tall ships in the race. She's a historic Chinese junk-rigged schooner. So really interesting sail design to sail.
How big is that boat?
I believe she's 48 feet.
Oh wow, it's tiny little.
Yeah,
Wow.
yes. So it's a pretty small boat as tall ships go. And on that boat we had 6 people on for the race. But when we're just doing dockside stuff, it's just the captain and one other person. And one of the things about schooners, the reason why they can sail with a smaller crew than a square rigged bark or something, is that you have the 2 masts, and so instead of having a giant sloop where you have one huge mast and a huge boom and a huge gaff, and you need tons of people just to raise that sail.
Yeah, all the manpower.
You can kind of raise the mainsail and then raise the foresail and kind of split that manpower. So you get kind of double the power. But yeah, it's fun to sail with a crew. And some of these boats, they might have 20, 30 people, crew members on board.
Wow.
And
climbing the masts and
yeah,
jeez.
and it's nice to have a crew. It's nice to pull into a new port and already have 10 friends with you or something.
Right,
So-
right. Yeah, it's like a little family on board. I mean, you're solo on your boat. Obviously, I'm solo on this one. And there's something to be said for that. But when you do have a great team that are all sort of working towards that same goal of maintaining and then using the ship, that is, it's a great feeling, especially when everything's going right, the winds are perfect, she's fully loaded and just sailing. There's nothing better. And when you can celebrate that with other people, besides just sitting there yourself and sort of smiling, it's a good feeling.
Yeah, and it's nice too because in my business I often work alone as well on the beehives, and that is something where, like, if I'm doing that all day on my own and then I'm living on the boat on my own, it's kind of nice to get out and do something with a crew and other people. And when you're trying to set up a bunch of sails, it's really nice to have stuff happening that you're not directly having to do every step of. And I'm just now getting into the solo sailing with this voyage, and it's a whole different experience. And there's definitely pros and cons to it, but yeah, it's interesting to see the contrast between soloing, where, like, if I need to pull up the anchor, I need to run from the anchor and haul it up as much as I can, then run back to the helm and motor up towards the anchor. And I explained it to one of my friends who didn't really do much with boats. And I explained it as it's kind of like driving an RV down the highway while trying to do a puzzle in the back of the RV.
Yeah, logistically it can be a bit dodgy at some points, but that's sort of part of it, is trying to figure out what's going to work best and how you have to modify whatever systems you have on the boat. And last night we were looking at some of the new tech that you're throwing on yours, which I'm sure will help out quite a bit. But it is, I think one of the real nice parts about solo sailing is you really do sort of become at one with the elements a little bit more in depth because there are less distractions around you, and it may take a few days of sailing sort of away from everything, but when you start to make that connection, I don't know, that's the time where you start to sniff out squalls and little noises wake you up from a dead sleep, and you prevent some terrible problem from happening. It's almost like you and the boat become one, and then you're just immersed in this ocean world. And I mean, I know it sounds a little flighty, but it's I think it can really only be done when you're by yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a different feeling. It's something where, like when I was on my own a lot, I saw dolphins pretty much every day. Even in the ICW inland, I was seeing dolphins would surface right next to the boat and swim along. So that was kind of nice to kind of be in touch with the nature and the boat and the land, and not just kind of focused on other people, because so much of our life we're just focused on other people. And when I had a crew member on board for the first month, I had a friend come with me, and that was super great to kind of get the feel for the boat, and especially because things broke literally every single day for the first 45 days.
Yeah.
It's day 46 that I didn't break anything.
The trial period, yeah.
So that was awesome to have an extra person at the helm, because something could break, the boat was taken on water, the engine would break, and I'd be trying to fix it, and she could be driving the boat, and that was really nice. And then but it's also nice to learn to do it on my own, and know that it's just a confidence building thing too, that the beginning of 2020, I'd really never taken my boat out on my own, with nobody else before. And I started training for it because I knew I'd have to be able to solo.
Yeah.
Even if, everybody says they want to come sailing to the Caribbean or down south for the
Yeah,
winter.
when it comes time to actually do it, it's a different story.
Yeah.
Well, and I, whenever I'm asked by, people who are thinking about, setting sail by themselves and stuff, if I have any advice, and my first advice always is, for your first few passages, make sure you have a second person on your boat. And I know it sounds sort of counterintuitive, like, well, I'm trying to learn how to solo sail, but what that does, you can still do everything on the boat, but it gives you a little bit of an escape route in case something does go wrong, or you do something sort of that's not actually going to work out if you were alone, but now all of a sudden you have somebody else. So you can make those mistakes. It gives you that buffer, and then you learn from it, sort it out, and then then you can go on and actually go out by yourself with a whole lot more confidence, because you've sort of worked out the systems. I mean, I screwed up so many things. I'm a true believer that learning from my mistakes is the best way to learn. And my very first sail on this boat was with my father, and it was a 12-day or 14-day passage down from Florida to the BVI. And I learned a ton of stuff. If I had to go through that all by myself, I'm fairly confident I would have made it, but it would have been frightening at times. It would have been frustrating. I'm sure I would have been questioning my plans to try and go around the world.
Yeah, so I did a week-long training sail that was exactly like that, and I brought two very experienced crew members with me who were super terrific to sail with, and I was learning from them, and also kind of getting a feel for the boat on a longer voyage.
What was the passage plan?
So we sailed. It was an event called the Troop Cruise, which is organized by the First City Troop, which is an Army troop in Philadelphia.
Oh wow, okay.
And yeah, really interesting group of guys. They were George Washington's Cavalry. It was when they were founded, and they their charter says they I think it was a fox hunting club back in the day that they were like, oh, George Washington doesn't have a cavalry, we'll go do it, and we'll do it for free. And their charter was that they donate back their pay, and they still do. And so just, yeah, terrific group of people. And we were doing this troop cruise together. Basically, we sailed from Philadelphia down to Rock Hall, Maryland. And then there's a race where all a bunch of them charter boats, and they do the race for the day, and then there's big crab dinner, which is really nice, and huge party every night. And first night there was 9 boats rafted up, and so one boat anchors, and then another boat ties up to that, and they kind of
Right. This huge flotilla, like
yeah.
a floating party, basically.
It was really, really incredible, and I learned from a lot of really great sailors. And on the way back, I had one of my crew members on board, and the engine broke down, so I was down below trying to fix the engine. She was driving the boat, or trying to sail the boat upwind back to where we came from. And the whole day I was just thinking, wow, if I was on my own, I don't know how I would possibly manage this. It would be impossible. And then got back to port. She got a ride back to Philadelphia, and the next day I thought I had fixed the engine. Sailed out again. The engine broke down. I was literally in the exact same waters, the exact same situation, solo. And I made it work. It was not as easy to kind of set a sail angle, run down below, and undo a hose clamp, and then run back up and try to avoid the jibe. And but you kind of make it work. And then once you go through that for it took about a week to get home, and then you just have that confidence. And now when those same engine issues happen, I can fix them in much faster because I've done it before.
Well, and that's one of the things I've always thought, that you can't really fear things breaking and problems sort of coming out of the woodwork, because every time a problem presents itself, you're gonna the first time it's gonna take a while to figure out and fix it, but once you've done that, then that's just added to your arsenal of, if that goes wrong again for whatever reason, I can take care of it without a thought. And the longer you're out and the more experience you get, the bigger your arsenal to fight all those issues. And that basically turns into just more confidence to go further or take on, bigger challenges out at sea.
Absolutely. And there's two really great books that I recommend for kind of understanding the experience. And the great thing is they're both called Endurance. There's Ernest Shackleton's Endurance.
Oh, yeah.
And that, is a phenomenal story of leadership and endurance, basically. And then the other one is about the first astronaut to spend a full year in space in the International Space Station. And he actually reads Shackleton's book
while
he's up there. And it's super, they're both super interesting. And one of the big takeaways from that book is, like, NASA's got probably the largest number of the most experienced engineers and scientists and astronauts, and still stuff breaks all day long, and it's just about how can you fix it, how can you make it easier to fix when you need to fix it. And so that's kind of the mentality that I'm taking. I'd rather have an engine that has broken and I fixed it and know how to fix it, than an engine that hasn't broken yet, because at some point it will, and you got to know kind of how to fix it. And the only way I really learn is through experience. So
yeah. And that's why you just can't fear it, because I've heard of a lot of people say, I'd like to go out there, but I don't really know much about engines, and I don't know really much about this or that, and they let that become an impediment to going after it. And in reality, you don't have to know everything about every little aspect of the boat. If you have a nice little reference guide or whatever, or have any imagination, you're going to figure out a way to fix it.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna start making a list of my takeaways for the trip, but it's basically one of the things that I was telling someone the other day is, when I started, I thought a 12-volt battery, when it was half charge, I thought that was 6 volts, which is not at all the case.
Right.
I couldn't tell you the difference between gas and diesel. I really have learned a lot, and just learning, like, the little things, like, washers are important. If it had locking washers on it when you
spreading
took it apart,
the load, yes.
yeah, you probably want locking washers on it when you put it back together. And
right.
that kind of thing is good to learn. And
yeah, and it is. I mean, and I think that's, in a lot of ways, it's not a bad part of this whole, like, sailing experience. It's a good part, because you take on these challenges and problems come up, and I guess you could consider those failures, but at the same time, you're going to overcome those, and you're probably going to do it multiple times a day, and that brings with it a great feeling. It's obviously a little scary at first. I remember when I was skirting Hurricane Ophelia, I ripped one of the winches off of the boom trying to put, like, the third reef in. and I'm just up there winching away. Everything's all good, just like normal. And then all of a sudden, pop! It explodes off the boom and almost falls in the water. And I'm thinking, I had only been out at sea maybe 2 weeks on the trip, and I look at the boom, and it's all the holes are super corroded. And my first thought was like, oh my gosh, this boom is going to actually probably snap. I can't believe how corroded it is, all this sort of stuff. And then, the next day, or well, I think it was probably like 3 or 4 days later, when the seas finally calmed down and I was able to fix it. And then after I fixed it, I knew it was actually installed correctly and it was much stronger. And I just felt great because I had sort of overcome this obstacle. And I don't know, you would never have that feeling unless something actually goes terribly wrong at the wrong moment, and then you have to actually overcome it. So I don't know. I think sort of the lesson I always learn from that is to not sit there and be afraid and let it impede what you're trying to do. You just got to go for it, because you just have to sort of believe in yourself that you will be able to overcome any of that stuff right when it happens. But just don't let it stop you from actually going out and trying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Words of wisdom.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's one of the other things that I tell people who are trying to get into boating is that the first thing that I tell them is it's okay to get a project boat. It's okay to get something that's a raw hull that you have to do everything to. You don't want to.
In a lot of ways, I'd say it's even better.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're not very experienced, you don't necessarily know that everything was done right, but you know how it was done, and then you can go back and do it over again, right? When you realize that you did it wrong the first time. And that's the best way to learn, especially for things that aren't, crucial safety things. And it's a different kind of sailing if you're trying to do the kind that you do, around the world solo type of sailing. You kind of have to make sure things are a higher caliber of done correctly. But, if people are starting out, it kind of makes sense that you can get a cheap boat that's in, rough shape that you can fix up. You can replace lines. You can do things your way, too, because even if I bought a brand new boat, I would probably want to go and change things and do them kind of my way, because there's a bunch of different ways that things can be done, and people have different preferences about that. And then the second thing is that you can get a boat for free.
That's true.
Gave away 3 boats this before I left that were just in my marina that I was living in, and I was able to get a hold of the owner and say, do you want this boat? And they'd want to sell it, but the boats are tough to sell, and especially in Philly, and they really weren't worth anything. So I had them sign it over to.
Were they pretty neglected?
Some of them, I mean, none of them were perfect, but they are, if you give them to people who are interested in fixing them up and making them nice. One boat we took something like 20 bags of trash off of the first day. But, it's a 36-foot catch that's, sailed down to Florida and the Bahamas, a number of times. So it'll be a beautiful boat when it's done being fixed up. But if you're willing to put the time and energy in, then you don't necessarily have to put in quite as much money as you would if you just want something that you can sail off the dock the day that you buy it. Right.
Well, I don't know if you've seen, there's a West Sail 32 that's on a mooring, maybe a quarter mile down that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I always looked at it because it's in really rough shape. It's been out there for years, but I ended up meeting the guy who owns it, and he just gave it away to somebody.
Yeah.
He was like, he got on there and somebody had broken in and sort of trashed the place a little bit, but he just, after he saw that, he just decided if he wasn't going to use it, he might as well just give it away. And, a West Sail the bones on these boats are fantastic. It could literally be completely burnt out in the middle, but you can always fix all the stuff inside. It's the actual hull and the mast and everything like that. If those are good, that boat's good to go. You just need to make it your own.
Yeah, absolutely. And so many of the systems, you want to replace, even if the wiring is even if it has wiring in it, if it's old, you might want to tear it out and replace it. So it doesn't really matter if it works or not if you're going to try to do that. Or right now I'm redoing a lot of the plumbing on my boat, and tearing out old nasty lines and replacing them with new fresh hose lines and putting in filters and things. And that's something that, like, if I bought a boat that's probably one of the first things I would do is replace all the plumbing. So if you're going to replace it anyway, it doesn't really matter what kind of condition it was in.
Yeah. Clean pipes is a nice thing, especially when you're trying to, drink the water that's in your tanks. I know when I finished the big trip, I replaced a lot of the just the hoses that go from the tank to the sink because they were basically black with mold and bacteria and all that sort of stuff. So those are some of the fun parts to be able to deal with. Well, again, not to totally switch gears, but beekeeping. That threw me for a curveball when we first met and we were talking and stuff, and I think one of the interesting things, is there's a lot of people that I meet that quit their job, sell their house, buy a boat, and they just go for it, and they figure out ways to earn a living along the way. But it seems like you've sort of skirted that, where you've been able to have this business and then also for like half the year, and then be on the boat and sort of sail off to wherever for the other half. How does that all work?
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate because the business that I'm in is seasonal. So, in the spring I go in, I purchase new hives of bees. They're called nucleuses, and I put them out and take care of them all year long. Check bees about every 2 weeks. I run about 53 hives right now on 30 different locations.
And that's up near Philadelphia?
Yep, all in and around Philadelphia.
So what are those bees doing right now?
So right now they are in the hive and eating honey, and that's
just chilling.
Yep. It's not quite hibernation, but it's they hang out in the hive and they eat honey in a big cluster, and they keep that cluster about 96 degrees with their body heat.
Wow.
So if I go up and open the hive when it's like 0 degrees, it'll just freeze them out. So there's really nothing I can do. Especially being at so many different locations.
And they're in those boxes?
Mm-hmm. So each hive is a stack of boxes. And the box doesn't have a top or a bottom on the individual component boxes. And so they can move freely up and down the stack. And then there's a lid on top of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And there's a bottom board on the bottom that has a little entrance in it. And then each box has 10 frames in it, and they hang down kind of like the pages. If you held a book by the spine, then the pages hung down. That's exactly
what
how
it looks like.
They hang down. And if the boxes were just empty, they would build that themselves. But I give them wooden frames to build in, and that way I can take apart their entire hive, inspect every single cell, see how the bees are doing, see if there's any disease. The new bees are being hatched. There's eggs. Eggs in the hive are super important, because that means the queen's happy and healthy. And sometimes I'll see the queen, sometimes I just see that there's day-old eggs, and then I know the queen is doing her thing. And then I put the hive back together and go on to the next one, and do that every 2 weeks. And then there's the Varroa Destructor mite, is a parasitic mite that attacks the bees and eats their fatty tissue in the larvae stages. And so that's really, really bad for the bees. I have to treat them for that. So there's a lot of work to do in the spring and summer and fall. And then after kind of the end of October, whenever I get the bees closed up, I extract the honey. So I take the frames out that have honey in them. I leave plenty for the bees to eat, take the rest out to my barn, cut off the wax cappings, and spin out the honey. It's like the spinner is kind of like a giant washing machine without the water.
Almost like a centrifuge.
Yeah, the centrifugal force just pulls the honey out, and then I jar it, custom label. I think I did 27 different custom label SKUs of honey. Because each client that I put bees on their property for, they get a custom labeled, jarred case of honey.
Right.
And so that kind of allows them to have something to give away to their friends, and kind of be able to have some kind of harvest from the hive. And then after all that's done, I got the boat ready and sailed this year. The last couple of years that I've been living on the boat, I stayed in Philadelphia and but there's not really much you can do for bees in the middle of the winter. So.
Right. Well, and I mean, it almost sounds like it sort of coincides with the bees sort of going into their quasi hibernation and the end of the hurricane season, so that it's safe. You know, the bees are safe to be on their own, and then you're safe to go out and sail south, you know, down to where we are in basically the hurricane belt.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that's great. How long? When did you first start doing the bee stuff, and how did you even get into that?
So I started when I was 12 years old. I went
Wow,
on
okay.
a field trip to a historic site that also kept bees, and it was Charles Thompson's country estate. So he designed the seal for the United States that's on every dollar bill.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So his
I did
country
not know that.
estate is in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. It's called Harriton House, and I went there, and they had bees. Learned about it and just really liked it. And back then, I was one of those kids that like just everything I saw, I was like, I want to do that. You know,
Right.
the week
The next
before,
day, I want to be a firefighter.
Yeah.
Which you do that
I
as
wanna
well.
be a sailor. Yeah. So it's and that's the thing. Like, you know, we tell ourselves these lies that you can't do it all, and the reality is like, you know, you have a lot of time, especially if you figure out how to make things not cost money and actually make you money. Like you can have a boat and have a business and, you know, do these different things. But beekeeping is really, really good in that way because you don't need much other than time and the ability to learn about stuff. Like the actual cost of a startup hive is only a few $100s, and you can even
That's for the boxes, and what you get a queen and a bunch of
yeah. So
are they
nowadays,
drone bees. No, they're not drones.
so
are
the
they?
drones are the
Oh, they
male
are drones.
bees. They don't really do much in the hive. They kind of hang out and
Yeah.
they fly out and try to mate with queens of other hives, and then the winter they get kicked out of the hive. And all the worker bees are the female bees. They do all the work in the hive. They have 18 different jobs through the course of their life. There's an undertaker bee that just brings dead bees out of the hive,
Right.
and there's foragers that bring nectar and pollen and honey and
That is so
nectar and pollen
interesting.
back to turn into honey. And yeah, so there's a lot of different jobs. They're really incredibly advanced creatures in the way that they are able to navigate and communicate. And
Well, they have like that whole social structure, and don't they pretty much all get along? I mean, can hives like sort of go to war with each other over territory?
so it's not so much over territory, but if a hive is weaker, another hive can occasionally come in and rob the honey that's left. So if a hive is kind of weak and it's dying out, another hive will come in and try to take the honey. And that can happen between honeybee hives. That can happen. Wasps will sometimes come in and try to rob a hive. But a strong, healthy hive will be able to defend them. So
well,
you
and
can
that's
have hives right
survival
next to
of the
each other.
fittest, really. So
Yeah, typically by the time it gets bad, you know, the hive is already dying out from something else, usually mites,
yeah.
and the robbing is not really the cause. A lot of people think it's the cause of the dying out because, you know, they go to their hive, it's super weak, they see wasps everywhere, they see bees from other hives coming in and taking the honey, and they think that's the cause, but really it's more the effect. It's the fact that the bees were weak in the first place because
Yeah.
of mites or you know, a bad winter, or they lost their queen or something like that.
Right. Wow. God, that is so crazy. And you're sort of, in a way, you're part of that hive because you're their keeper, making sure, you know, they're okay, and you're their doctor, you're their mover, you're their protector. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's you know, after doing it for 15 or 16 years, it's something where it's really nice to be able to have that kind of experience and go into a hive. If it's super hot, I often just don't wear a suit, bee suit. I just go in with shorts and a t-shirt.
Yeah, how many times have you been stung?
Oh, more times than I can count.
Innumerable?
All at one time, I think I lost count about 20 stings.
In one shot?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
they and usually, you know, it may have been more than that, but usually that's a bad day. I think I did a move this last year that I must have been stung at least 30 or 40 times. But there's different kinds of stings. So when I get stung, I'm not like, I'm mostly immune to venom, so I'm not
Right.
gonna
Oh,
swell
I
up.
think.
Like if you get stung, your whole arm might swell up or your face or whatever. But I've been stung so many times that like it still hurts, but it's not going to give me as much of a venom load. And then I wear the bee suit most of the time, and when they sting through the suit, so like right now the wrists, my wrists are a place I get stung a lot because the gloves for my suit aren't as good as the rest of the suit.
Oh,
so,
that's like the weak point.
Yeah, so I get stung in the wrist, but when you're stung through a suit, the stinger doesn't go all the way in and give you a full venom load, so it's just little tiny half stings.
Right. Well, because does their stinger come out?
Yeah, so when a honeybee stings you, their stinger's barbed.
Yeah.
It's pretty much just the worker bees. The drones can't sting, and the queen can sting, and she can sting multiple times, but she doesn't sting to defend the hive.
Right.
So the only people who really ever get stung by a queen are like queen breeders who are handling queens a lot in there.
Yeah.
And even then, it's usually the bee isn't even, she's not trying to actually sting someone in defense. She's just trying to crawl away or whatever. And but the workers, when they sting, they have a little barb on their stinger, and it'll go in, and the stinger gets stuck in you, and then as the bee flies away, it pulls out its the venom sac and the bee's entrails. So the bee actually dies pretty horribly when they sting. So they really don't want to sting.
Yeah, it's like defensive. Just
they'll only really sting to defend the hive.
Right.
And then so you want to get that stinger out as quickly as possible, and without squeezing it. So you can sometimes flick it out with they say in the scouts they always said use a credit card, and
press just like toink toink. Yeah.
So yeah.
Ugh, the only real bee story I have that was of any interest, I would think, because it sort of involves boating. But I was in the British Virgin Islands, and where I worked at the bitter end, it was about a mile to get to the ferry terminal, and you just go over. It's like a big bay, and I was driving my Boston Whaler across it, and as I'm going, I sort of see just something in the sky. I didn't really recognize it, didn't register what it was at first, and then as I got closer, I realized it was like a little swarm of bees, maybe a few thousand of them, not super tightly packed, but all obviously in that one clump. And as they approached, they were only maybe 10 or 12 feet above the surface of the water. And as they were coming, and I crossed right past them, I got stung like twice. Like two of them came down and sort of attacked me. And I can only imagine that must have been, and I guess I should ask you, but would that have been like a hive moving with the queen or something?
Yeah. So what that sounds like, if they were honeybees, it sounds like that was a swarm, which is when a hive fills up with honey and it's doing really well. Usually in Philly, it's usually in the early spring. Where the hives made it through the winter, they're super strong, and what the queen will do is she'll lay eggs for a new queen, so the queen can choose whether she lays a male or female egg. And the male eggs are unfertilized; they're only a haploid cell.
Yeah.
So they're actually a genetic clone of the queen, which is super interesting biologically.
And we're not even able to do that. These bees are so far advanced.
But so she lays a queen. An egg in a queen cell, and the workers will feed that egg royal jelly, which is like a super honey kind of thing, where it's makes her bigger and stronger. And so once she's got new queens developing, she'll fly away with 60% of the workers.
Oh, okay. Relocate.
So then they'll start a new hive, and when the new queen hatches, then she'll kind of take over the old hive.
Right.
And that way the new hive goes in with starts up with a new queen who already has fertilized eggs. She can start laying eggs right away. And a big part of what I do in the spring is capturing those swarms. If I want to buy a nucleus, it's $185. So if I can catch a swarm,
to start your own another one.
Yeah, so if I catch a swarm, that's almost $200 of bees right there, and they're pretty easy to catch. What you do is when that swarm lands, it'll basically look like a basketball on a tree. It'll just be a ton of a huge clump of bees.
I think I've seen pictures of that.
Yep, and you just shake that into a box or clip off the branch, and
because the queen's like right in the middle of it all.
Yeah, if you get the queen into the box, they'll smell her pheromones and they'll
And
all
they'll
walk
just
into the
stay,
box.
right.
So
So let me ask you this, just from a like, I just realized how if when I was driving that boat, for whatever reason, the queen, saw the yellow deck, or because I paint yellow decks on all my boats,
I noticed.
believe it or not. But if that queen would have like decided to come down and attach itself right onto the boat with the rest of them, they would have just followed suit, and I would have been in real trouble.
Well, so yeah, they could definitely have done that. Typically, they probably wouldn't do something while it was moving,
But it's possible.
but it's possible.
Oh my gosh!
If you had just been drifting, especially if they want a break,
Yeah.
what they'll do is usually a couple feet off the ground. Ideally they do it like 4 feet off the ground, but when I try to catch them, they always seem to be 50 feet up in a bendy tree. But yeah, so if the queen lands, and then basically that whole tornado of bees would come down on the boat and then fly into this big land into this big clump, and then there wouldn't be that many flying around.
Oh, right. They'd all just be there.
But swarms are pretty gentle. They typically aren't stinging because there's no hive to protect. So you can be stung by them occasionally.
Yeah.
But it's not like if you go up to an actual beehive and you open it up and you start working on the bees, then they're more likely to be defensive.
Right.
So yeah, that's
that's incredible.
They're pretty. They can be pretty gentle when they.
Well,
do it.
what's your favorite part about working with bees?
It's nice to when like you get that perfect day where the weather's not 100 degrees in the suit, and you're going through hives and it's going pretty well, and it's great because it's like you speak the same language as the bees. Like it's kind of like if a dog comes up to you, if that dog is gonna try to bite you or trying to like just looking to be pet. I can do that with bees. Like you can tell by the way they're buzzing, the way they're moving, if they're trying to sting you, and it just never gets boring. I mean, there's you can see I saw a new bee being hatched pretty much every day if you take the time to look in the cell, and just being able to open up this world that most people never get to see. And
it's going to be almost
part
like
of
a
it,
little bit of a god complex sometimes, where you're sort of like surveying your little civilizations when you're looking at multiple hives and you sort of control them all.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know how much control I really have over them.
Well,
but
that's true. Yeah,
it's
or I shouldn't say you're providing for them. They're
yeah, it's
safe
one of those.
haven.
It's one of those things where it's like it's like tending a flock of sheep, or like any other kind of farming. It's you try to take care of them, and they try to hopefully they'll be able to take care of you. And
Right.
no matter what you do, it never really seems to be enough to get those bees to be as big or prosperous as you'd like. Sometimes you work on a hive all year and give it everything it needs, and it doesn't produce any honey or dies over the winter, and you just kind of have to start over with another hive. And sometimes you have a hive that you don't do anything to, and it gets I got 150 pounds of honey out of one of my hives one year.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was the most I've ever gotten, and the hive was taller than I was because you just keep on adding boxes until you're ready to harvest.
Yeah.
And it was on this really rickety shed roof, and so it was physically too much weight for it. So we just kept on pulling boxes off and freezing the honey until we were ready to harvest. And yeah, it ended up being 150 pounds of honey. We didn't really do much to that hive. It just kind of got established and started
itself.
doing its thing. So you try to do everything you can, but it just depends on the weather and what you're doing. And they always say, people will always say like, wow, this is so exciting. Like you get to the bees do all the work. You just start a beehive, and then you take the honey out of the hive, and it's like that's not really how that works. It's
Right.
a lot of work. But
Well, and so like with that 150 pounds of honey, how does that turn into revenue for you?
So in that case, I had two other beekeepers. It was kind of early on, and I had two other beekeepers I was kind of teaching and working on the hives with. So we split that honey 3 ways, which is not really how I do it much anymore. And then I sell the honey. I jar it and label it and sell it to my customers for $20 a pound.
Oh, okay.
And that's higher than anyone else sells honey for. Like you can definitely
cure.
And one of the reasons that I do that is I basically ask all the other beekeepers what they're selling their honey for, and I sell it for a little bit more. And that's kind of the opposite of how pricing is supposed to work in a capitalist society. But my idea is that I don't want to undercut any other beekeeper.
Right.
I already have the customer base that'll pay more for the honey, and if people want cheap honey, there's definitely
like
other
Chinese
places to
honey
do
or
it.
something like that. It's really not all that great.
Yeah, so there's a process called honey laundering, which is kind of funny because it sounds like money laundering.
I've gone down a couple of YouTube rabbit holes about
Yeah.
the honey.
They can
you
take
know.
rice syrup and basically make it taste and look something like what most people think honey tastes like, and they sell it in big box stores, and they'll import it to the U.S. and cut it with other honeys, and you end up with this really nasty like high fructose corn syrup or rice syrup
it's
product.
basically fake honey.
Yeah, so then they sell that for pretty cheap, and even real honey is kind of subsidized by the pollination industry. So when most beekeepers don't make a living from selling honey, they make a living from moving their bees around on trucks to almond orchards and peach orchards and all the different crops that need to be pollinated.
Yeah.
Because they're only planting the one thing. They don't have wild bee populations that can pollinate that. So they bring bees in on trucks, and you can get some crops, you get 250 times the yield, or 250% as much of a yield when you have bees on the property, because they need to. Every single almond is pollinated by a honeybee. It's about a third of everything we eat is
that's
pollinated
right.
by
Yeah,
honeybees.
it wraps into the big agriculture world when it
Yep.
comes.
So then when you're, you can make, I think,
tangled web.
yeah, and it goes into monocropping and pesticide use, and it just kind of becomes that whole empire, and it's a tricky mess that we're in, because if you plant all one thing, then you get super pests, and then you need to that just really like eating that one tree, and then you need to spray harsher chemicals, and then you need to truck in bees, and now you're spraying harsh chemicals near bees, and,
Right. Yeah, and when just some good biodiversity would cure all of it.
yeah, and a lot of people, and I've worked on organic farms and things, and people are like, why don't people just do it organic? And I'm like, well, do you want to sit out in a field and squash bugs one at a time? Because that's, if you're not spraying, that's often what you're doing.
Yeah.
And
It's basically impossible.
yeah, so I mean, farmers don't spray pesticides just for the fun of it, but it's also not a super sustainable system. But it produces a lot of food, so that's kind of what we need to do if we need to continue producing enough food to throw half of it away. So.
Yeah, we could go on and on. Well, I guess to just sort of wrap up the bee stuff, if people were more interested in sort of learning about that, is there any documentaries or any books that you would recommend?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different resources. Every year there's kind of new documentaries that come out, and I think that is kind of good to stay on top of, because it changes so often. So,
Yeah.
the documentaries from 2 years ago are talking about different issues than they're having now. If people are interested in having bees and they're in the Philadelphia area, they can check out my website at elishoneybees.com.
Nice.
I'll shameless plug there.
Yeah, well,
So-
I'll put a link to that for sure. So
Yeah. And
get you some more bee money.
yeah, the big
some
thing,
honey money.
yeah, the big thing is making if you're interested in starting to keep bees, find a local beekeepers meeting. Most, everywhere pretty much in the country has some kind of a beekeeper club or a beekeeping guild.
Yeah.
And talk to other beekeepers, and just talk to as many people as you can, and use as many different resources as possible. There's not one size fits all book.
Right.
The ABCs and XYZs of beekeeping is kind of like the beekeeping Bible, it's called. But there's so much new information out there.
Yeah.
Every single year for the new things that come up. that you really have to use a combination of, the old books. I use beekeeping books when I teach. Some of them are over 200 years old.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I use like very early, a lot of very early texts about from beekeeping, and kind of tying in with the fact that I learned beekeeping at a historic site. A lot of the founding fathers were beekeepers. In their country estates, it was kind of considered like a gentleman's profession a little bit.
Well, and a perfect way to get some sugar and
Yep.
add, because when there aren't huge grocery stores just stocked shelf to shelf, back then that would have been a major source of nutrition, glucose, flavoring, everything.
Yeah, and this is a good climate for it because the maple syrup's another one where you can get sugar, but that's a little bit easier to do farther north. And so beekeeping and getting that sugar sweetener that way is a lot easier than trying to refine cane sugar and things like that.
Or cracking open
And
a soda.
especially back before chemical agriculture
Yeah,
and stuff.
all that stuff.
There's a lot more. There was a lot easier to keep bees, alive and happy and healthy. So
Yeah, all the pollutants, and I would think the pesticides must be just horrific for the bees, but
yeah, they don't help.
yeah, well, geez. Well, that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing all that. That is really cool to sort of I guess wrap things up a little bit because we're already at an hour, believe it or not. What does do you have any future goals or plans as far as the sailing or adventuring sort of aspect of your life right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think this voyage that I'm doing, like I could definitely see doing a longer version of this in the future. One thing I've been kind of kicking around is the idea of getting a horse-drawn wagon and doing like a road trip across the country by like
All by horsepower?
yeah, just like a horse, the 1 horsepower project or something.
Whoa, that'd be pretty cool.
And just taking the slow, like that kind of I kind of like the slow pace of sailing, and I think that doing that on the roads by horse-drawn wagon would be pretty cool. So
I'll tell you what, I have had for at least the last year the strangest urge to run across the U.S., like from San Francisco to Boston or something. I don't know why. I can only imagine it would be torture pretty much the entire time, but it's so strange. Sometimes you get these ideas in your head.
yeah.
And unfortunately, I have a bit of a reputation of getting the idea and then actually ending up trying to carry it out. But wow, across any as far as sailing, are there any spots that you'd like to be able to one day set sail and have them appear over the horizon?
Oh yeah, I'd love to make it down to the Bahamas, the Caribbean,
And that's all within reach too.
and and I think that's eventually I'd love to go. I'd kind of love to go everywhere, and the shortest route to go everywhere is go all the way around.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But that would be I'd need a little more than 6 months to do that.
That one takes a little time, and to be honest, compared to the trip that I did, because I'm not stopping anywhere, is actually far less expensive than if you wanted to, go through the Panama Canal, South Pacific, Indian Ocean, back around, and do maybe a 3 to 5 year circumnavigation. But at least with that, you do have the opportunity to work sort of along the way. But and you're also in a much more pleasant climate the whole time. The Southern Ocean it's not really a fun place.
Yeah,
It's an
I'm starting
amazing
to-
place,
starting
but
to
it's
gather that,
it's a little messed up. Well, okay, well that's cool, man. I wish you the best of luck, and I'm glad. How long are you going to be here for?
I'll probably be here till about mid-February, and then start working my way back up north to get the bees started up in March or April.
Okay, so that's when it starts. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely be doing some projects and hopefully helping each other out and getting our boats all sorted. And yeah, it's great to see somebody taking off and getting into it and enjoying sailing. I mean, every time I swing by Eli's boat, what's the name of the boat?
Zephyr.
Zephyr. Yeah. Every time I go up to Zephyr, he's got this really great workbench that it's like a sneaky one. So it can be folded up, and then you just unlatch one thing, it folds down, and everything's hanging and all this sort of stuff. But he's always working on something, tinkering, and it actually kicks me in the butt a little when I'm a little lazy or just watching videos or something like that. And there's always a million projects I could be doing. But when I see you, I'm sort of like, oh, yeah, I guess I should probably do something too.
I don't know. It's funny because whenever I come over to Mighty Sparrow, I'm always like, wow, I wish my boat was like this clean and organized and there's not tools all over the floor. And yeah.
Well, like I said, though, I mean, when I'm up in the boatyard in Maine, typically this boat is just tools and piles of projects and this and that. But I don't know. I've always, and I think it comes from a lot of time working on other people's boats before I started really doing my own sailing. And at the end of the day, if you were trying to present a real professional air, you'd clean up everything, the job site, so that, you know, the next day, if the owner came in, they'd see this, you know, everything's looking good instead of just an absolute mess of tools and shavings and all sort of stuff. So I've always, even if I tear this boat apart during the day, by the time it's cracking beer time, I typically will take like 10-15 minutes just to like put stuff away. If you went around this boat with a white glove, you'd probably have a lot of mold on your finger. So it's not actually technically clean, but it's just like put away. And you know, some days it's better than others, but what can you do?
That's a habit I'm trying to get into, the cleanup after your projects.
Yeah, it's sometimes the last thing you want to do, because you're just going to have to crack into all that same stuff the very next day. And yeah, I guess it for me, it just depends on the depth of the project I'm going into, but
yeah, 100%.
We'll have to see. I'm hoping to break into some of these water pipes today and find where the air is coming from.
Sounds fun.
Well, thank you, Eli, again for coming on the podcast. And like I said, I'll throw the links in. Is there any other things you want to shout out? You got your website, anything else?
No, I think that's it. Thank you, though.
Hopefully soon coming, maybe some YouTube action. I'd love to see some of these hives on YouTube. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I think I might be starting a YouTube or this new TikTok thing.
Yeah, TikTok. I mean, that one's taking off and it's growing, and you can do quick, easy videos with that one.
Yeah.
YouTube, though, if you have more long form stuff, that'd probably be the place to go. But yeah, I feel like that'd be pretty interesting to be able to almost share with your viewers a season of beekeeping, where they get to watch and see the things growing and changing and all that. That'd be pretty cool, man. All you need is a GoPro.
Absolutely.
All right, Eli, have a good day. Thanks for listening.
All right, thank you.
You're at your old trusty boat you call Mighty Sparrow. I'm in the city of Mardi Gras.
Hey everybody, just a quick note. If you enjoy this podcast, you can now support it. Just go to Podbean online, search Sailing into Oblivion, and you can become one of my patrons. It would be hugely appreciated and make sure that this podcast keeps going on and on. Thanks for listening.